The Block is making a tree change, and the Official Block podcast is where we drill into the details. New episodes every Monday, thanks to Simonds, the great Australian builder. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
9 podcasts.
Hello! Contemporary Australian country at its finest.
Love, love, love.
Hello and welcome to the Block podcast with me, Shelley Craft. Kitchens, they are the heart of the home, and this week the Blockheads certainly put their whole hearts into crafting theirs.
My kitchen is sick. I love it.
Judges are saying, wow.
But not every couple's kitchen warmed the judges' hearts.
It is a kitchen without a soul.
Up soon, Judge Neale Whitaker on what fired him up about last night's kitchen reveal and what left him a little undercooked.
It doesn't sell the dream to me.
And later, well, our hearts certainly go out to this couple, Rachel and Ryan. Yes, they were not quite on the winner's podium, but after a week where it seems they couldn't stand the heat or leave the kitchen, there's going to be plenty for us to chew over.
It's a roller coaster, and it's hard when it doesn't feel fair.
So go ahead and hit the follow or subscribe wherever you listen to us right now and never miss a moment of the Official Block podcast. Thanks to Simonds Homes. Simonds, the great Australian builder. Again and again, the survey says that when it comes to which room we tend to spend the most time in, the kitchen is king. Well, when you're awake and conscious, anyway. And I imagine that goes double for someone who was the founding editor of a food magazine. Neale, we all survived Kitchen Week. Oh, the relief.
Some of us better than others.
Yes. Well, you and I didn't really have to do too much, did we?
No.
Is it your favourite room of the house, the kitchen?
Look, yes, I think it is. It would have to be. I've been saying for years, that life gets lived in the kitchen, and I still believe that just as much as I always did. I remember once saying on the show that, once we'd had Kitchen Week, it's like the heart of the house has started to beat. I feel like everything that comes after Kitchen Week is somehow different to everything that came before it. You just get much more of a sense, I think, of the house and the way it's going to look at the end.
Well, interestingly too, these kitchens are in the new pavilions of the home, and we saw a real switch up of some styles. I had the opportunity to talk to Julian Brenchley last week about that balance between country and contemporary, and I think he was really hoping that these kitchens would be the most contemporary kitchens we've ever seen on the block, but some of the contestants kept a lot of country elements in there. What was your take?
Oh, look, I'm really glad that they did. I think that it was an interesting mix of kitchens, yes. We went from Tom and Sarah Jane in House 1, which was, I think, as I said on air, a very, very beautiful luxe contemporary country kitchen, to Omar and Oz in House 5, who couldn't have been more contemporary. It was 100% modern kitchen. And then every shade in between. And I like that. I think Tom and Sarah Jane's kitchen is kind of what I was hoping to see from these kitchens. To me, that still had the spirit of a country home, but it had every single modern bell, whistle, gadget that you could possibly need.
Didn't it? The charcuterie fridge, my goodness, what a luxury that is.
Charcuterie and fromagerie, Shelley. It was a cheese and meat fridge.
Unbelievable.
I don't think I've ever seen one of those in a home before. That is luxury.
And perfectly fitting for a country kitchen. Not that you're out there, killing and smoking your own beast, but perhaps some are churning their own cheese out there on those beautiful properties.
Exactly. And now they've got somewhere to keep it.
They also had one of those fabulous pot-filling taps.
Yes.
Now, there's sort of a contentious issue. Are they legal? I guess is the question I want to know. I've always thought I couldn't have one of those here in Australia.
You and me both. I thought I couldn't have one either. I think they are magnificent. And my partner David, who is an ex-chef, wants one desperately. And now he's seen one on the block. I don't think there's going to be any stopping him.
No, that's right.
Anyone who really, really loves to cook wants one of those.
Well, it just makes sense, doesn't it? And that's where this form and function come together in perfect unison.
Yes, absolutely. But I think we are fleeting over the topic of whether they're legal or not. Should we move on?
Yeah, well, it's not for you or I to say, is it? Not for you or I. Okay, what are the things when you're talking functionality of a kitchen? What are the key things that everyone needs to think about?
Well, look, I think Darren is always very hot on, what does he call it, the famous triangle, that space between the sink, the cooktop and the fridge. And that is important. I mean, you've got to think about the proximity of those three things together. But I mean, very, very high on my list, of course, is storage, and very high on my list is having enough dishwashers and enough waste bins, garbage bins. I am the first person to admit that I made a big mistake in my own kitchen because we didn't put a garbage bin in the butler's pantry. We only put them in the main kitchen. I haven't got around to correcting that little mistake yet. Thinking about the practicality, particularly if you've got a butler's pantry, and more of us do have butler's pantries these days, think about making sure that they function as well, because there's nothing more irritating than stacking up all the plates and everything in the butler's pantry and then realising that your only garbage bin is in the main kitchen.
Yeah, you've stuffed up there big time.
Oh, no, look, I have. And I admitted it on air in a previous season of The Block. So, I'm cool with that confession. That to me is functionality. Storage and garbage.
It is so tricky, though, to get it right, and particularly with these contestants designing their kitchens almost in the first week that they were on the block without any real concept of what on earth they were going to create around them is a challenge in itself. And to hit all those points and to nail them, huge kudos to our fabulous friends at Freedom Kitchens for guiding our contestants through this, because it is not an easy task. I mean, I'm the same. I toed and froed over my kitchen layout for weeks before I actually locked it down.
Absolutely. I feel for these contestants because I always think that in that first week of the competition when they've just arrived at the block and they're all getting used to sort of the strangeness, I guess, of being on the block and having cameras in their faces at all times of the day and night and being mic'd up at all times of the day and night. They've also got to get their head around planning their kitchens. And that plan can't change because it has to be locked in. That cabinetry has to be ordered. So, yeah, I feel for them. And frankly, I think all of the couples last night did a pretty damn good job.
Well, again, I'd be happy with any one of those kitchens, and the fact that those spaces where they were supposedly doing, a measure for their kitchens didn't even exist, wasn't even built. There was nothing there. They just had to imagine what they would look like.
Yes.
They did do a phenomenal job.
Absolutely, they did. House 4, where I think it was only 24 hours before that they even had a roof over the kitchen.
Pure madness. Let's just put it that way.
Yes.
I believe too, not only is the kitchen the heart of the home, but it's also now one of our greatest entertaining spaces. No matter whether you're having, just family, whether it's friends, whether it's a massive party, we all do gather around that kitchen bench. So along with your dishwashers and enough bins, you've also got to have enough bench space for entertaining.
Absolutely you have. It's funny, isn't it? Because I grew up in an era when the kitchen and the dining area were totally separate spaces. I'm talking about growing up in the UK, but I'm sure it was the same here in Australia. That, like my mother, for example, the last thing she would ever have wanted was for her guests to see her in the kitchen cooking. That was something that just magically happened behind a closed door. And then the food appeared on the dining table. But of course, that's all long behind us. We all want those seamless, integrated, open kitchen and dining spaces. And, I think last night gave us some very good examples of that. I mean, yes, I can imagine, the dinner parties, the get-togethers that could be held in those kitchens.
Speaking of that, Neale, we have butler's pantries the size of any normal kitchen in any normal house in the country. I think these kitchens these days are really just for display, and the butler's pantry is the workroom, referring back to what your mother had, the kitchen that was never seen, aka our butler's pantries, and our dining rooms, which now just happen to have a sink in the middle of them, really.
Look, I think you're right. I absolutely think you're right. Gosh, I mean, I think I've lived in apartments in my life that were smaller than those butler's pantries. They were absolutely magnificent. And I do tend to agree that, the front of house, if you like, the main kitchen is becoming much more like a dining room with gadgets, really, that looks amazing. But the real hard work, yes, is done out back now in the butler's pantry. That is a phenomenon that we're starting to see more and more.
There has to be that balance, though, and I've had arguments with Scotty over this in our previous series and previous walkarounds, that, say, in apartments, I mean, a butler's pantry is a true luxury, but it sometimes comes at the expense of space that could be better utilised for something else. I mean, does every house these days need to have a butler's pantry? Is that a big sales point for you?
Look, I agree with you there. I think sometimes, I'm not talking necessarily about the block now, but I'm talking about in real life. We are sort of guilty of putting in butler's pantries because we feel we need to have them. And as you say, it's at the expense of space that could perhaps be better used elsewhere. My advice to anyone would always be, yes, have a butler's pantry, but only if you've got space for it. Coming back to the block, there's no problem. Those living dining spaces, or the living spaces that are coming up next week, are just, aircraft hangar size. So I don't think anyone was compromising with the space last night by putting in those magnificent butler's pantries. It's not something that these contestants in this season of the show are going to have to worry about.
There were some compromises along the way, though. In the styling, for instance, I know you said that Encore and Sharon's, their styling wasn't quite there. Rachel and Ryan's kitchen was described as soulless. Was there just not enough styling there to make that feel like a home?
No, it felt very bare. I mean, unfortunately, we came into Rachel and Ryan's kitchen immediately after Tom and Sarah Jane's kitchen. It just made the sort of the differences all the more obvious. Ryan and Rachel's was, pardon the pun, it was undercooked. It really was. It just needed more touches to make it feel authentic, to make that emotional connection to it. It was a little bit too sparse, a little bit too stark. I mean, they had presented it as very much a blank canvas, and I don't think the kitchen is the place to do that. With Encore and Sharon, their styling was just messy. It was messy. Everything felt, I think I used the word plonked. Things were plonked down, and it just didn't feel like any thought had been given to it. And unfortunately, in the butler's pantry in particular, that random sort of collection of things that were just thrown around actually made it feel smaller. I had this overwhelming urge to tidy up and put everything away. They weren't doing themselves any favours with that sort of rather messy styling.
Neale, we saw a lot of luxury inclusions in these kitchens, from the V-Zug, oh goodness, you can't even call that a sink, can you? Obviously the pot-filling tap over the stove. We saw the sommelier drawer in Encore and Sharon's butler's pantry. What would be your ultimate inclusion? Which one of these items would you choose for your next kitchen?
What, other than a garbage bin in my butler's pantry? That would be the luxury I need at the moment. But no, seriously, look, I've never had a beautiful wine fridge, and I've certainly never had a charcuterie fridge. I mean, both of those would be rather lovely things to have, particularly the wine fridge. That would be my ultimate luxury inclusion in my kitchen. But also, I love those massive cooking ranges that seem to go on forever and ever. I love all that.
Oh, Neale, look, it's always fun and games in the kitchen, isn't it? Whether you've got a pot filler or a charcuterie fridge. Thank you so much for joining us again on the Block Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Shelley. Speak to you again soon.
The official Block Podcast is sponsored by Simonds, the great Australian builder. Every day at Simonds, our people stand by our promise to be with you throughout your new home journey. Over the last 70 years, Simonds have seen and dealt with it all. And despite today's trade and material shortages, our size and strong relationships means we'll deliver on what we promise. So if you're ready to join the thousands of Australians we're welcoming home each month, talk to Simonds, the great Australian builder. Find out more at simonds.com.au. CDB-U 49491. Hey, if you love this podcast and never want to miss out on any of the exclusive peeks behind the curtains, judge brain pickings, or top advice from the Block's best, make sure you tap follow or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Well, usually when we talk about kitchen dramas, we talk about what happens in them when they're already built. But this week, the Block's kitchen drama was definitely no less fraught.
I can't say anything more than I'm probably just at my point of exhaustion.
Rachel and Ryan, finally I get to chat to you here on the Block podcast. Welcome.
Thank you
Hello,
very
Shelley,
much.
our favourite person on the block.
Still, even after watching it on air, sitting at home in the comfort of your lounge rooms, you still like us?
Always.
Absolutely.
Always, of course.
We'll always love you, Shelley.
Oh, thank you so much. Hey, how have you enjoyed the ride post the ride? Are you sitting there with the family every night watching the show?
I actually had a chat to someone from the crew in the first week, and he said to me, you will feel the same emotions during watching it that you felt during the show. And I thought, oh God, I hope not, because it was a roller coaster of emotion. But it's so true.
It's a completely different experience though, isn't it? When you're sitting there and you're watching yourself. And first, I guess, are you used to the idea now of seeing yourselves on the telly? Because that's often quite confronting for people.
Absolutely not. Like, it actually probably took us 2 weeks to sit there and watch the first 2 weeks of the show and go, we're actually on TV and we did the block.
Yeah, we're still not used to it.
We're still not that used to it.
And your kids, definitely the biggest thing for all parents we have on the show is leaving their children at home. You've got 3 little ones. Are they now a little bit more understanding or accepting of the fact you're away? Or is it like you never went away at all?
No, they are not happy with us still going away at all. I just hung up from the beautiful Kate who works with us, and she just said, Mila, our middle one, is not having fun today. We're a bit scared of the block, and so we didn't tell them that we were going to be at the block this morning, and then they just saw us on the Today Show and it was live from the block, and they said they weren't going there. So hopefully we win a lot of money and then we can get them some good therapy.
That's right. There's got to be some payoff for the kids in there.
Yeah, 100%. A puppy or a pony.
Is that depending on the size of the win, is it? A puppy or a
pony. A puppy if we win money. We'll steal SJ and Tom's pony if we don't win money.
Yeah, well, we're gonna have to move if we're going to want to buy a pony. So it must be a big price tag.
Actually, I've got these 5 beautiful houses on acreage coming up for sale if you feel like moving over the border.
We hear House 2's really good.
Yeah. House 2 is beautiful and it's shaping up so beautifully. I really hope you are feeling proud.
We are. We're so proud. Just what we did, the size of it and the weather conditions, and it's no wonder we're all an absolute mess because it was just crazy.
When you look back and go, holy moly, like how did we do those things? And then you get up next Monday and you do it all again. And in the real world, when you're doing these renovations, you've got time to plan, you've got time to sample different things, and you just don't have that time on here. So you take your hat off to all the contestants. Like, everyone does such a good job in getting these rooms finished in 6 days. It's amazing.
It is amazing. And look, Kitchen Week, which is what we're talking about today, is nothing short of extraordinary. The fact that you pretty much designed that the first day you guys arrived on the block, because your kickoff was a little bit different to everybody else's. No idea what the space was, no real idea of the dimensions, no idea of what style you were even going to do. And you were at your first kitchen consult. That's madness.
You have these dreams of doing the block and Kitchen Week. Everybody wants to do Kitchen Week. And for us, it all happened so quickly that we just kind of put together what we could at that moment and crossed our fingers.
But come on, I mean, we spoke heavily about your kitchen on our walk-arounds, and you didn't even have a ceiling at that point. I think when we were there, you weren't sure where the roof line was going to start or finish, but you have such conviction. And kitchen, even though it was that mad rush at the beginning, you have a real innate style, and I believe you delivered that in your kitchen, whether the judges liked it or not.
You know, I feel like especially right now in Kitchen Week, my confidence is probably at the lowest. I'm really at a point where I don't really know what more to do. They're asking for rooms that take massive risks, and we're just not aligning. Right now in Kitchen Week, I know what we have picked in terms of our cabinetry and our stone, and I know that it's not going to wow them. But I live a chaotic life, and we have 3 kids and we have a lot of things going on, and I need my house to feel calm. And I go into everything thinking about that, thinking about how I'm going to feel when I'm in it. I hope we're delivering calm spaces, and if they're coming across timid or safe, I think I just have to wrap my head around the fact that I'm okay with that.
And also the fact that we have a vision for the living room. We know the living room needs to be something very kind of out there. It's going to be a focal point. It's where a lot of people are going to sort of hang around and want to be. So our vision when we went to that kitchen consult is we can't just go over the top with the kitchen. You know, we're going back and forth with Freedom going, you know, they're like, oh, do you want to add in different colour joinery for your overheads? And we're like, no, we don't. We actually don't want that. We know the grand size of this and we don't want it to be too overpowering.
I love your ethos because your home is your sanctuary.
Absolutely.
And only you know the overall vision, and the judges have been tough on you week in and week out for perhaps being too contemporary, perhaps being a little bit reserved with your colour palette. But only you know ultimately, and maybe you don't even at this point, ultimately what that overall feel is that you're going to have when the house is created. So you've got to stick to your guns, but I can understand how getting that feedback from the judges every week starts to make you question your choices a little bit or a lot.
Yeah, a lot. And this week more than any other week, I think for me personally, this week is pivotal in my block journey. There's highs and there's lows, but if this week didn't happen, I don't think that the rest of our journey would be what it was.
I'm sure I said to you over the course that every team has their breaking point. And some people crack in the first couple of weeks and then they get over it and they spend the rest of the series embracing the opportunity and taking the bull by the horns, really. But you've got to reach that point for yourself where you either pack it in or you break all the way down and then rebuild from that point. And as you say, Rach, that week was this for you. Ryan, how hard was it to watch Rachel going through that this week?
It was really hard. There's been a few multiple weeks now of Rach being down and we're getting, you know, slammed in the judging and stuff. But the one thing I knew about Rach is she was always going to pick herself up. It's just a matter of when she did it. We also started, you know, Tim and Tyler's this week, and that put a lot into perspective of your journey on the block. And I'm so glad Rach picks herself up after this week.
That's great. We didn't get a lot of commentary from you this week, Ryan. Is that because you were sort of staying low, getting out of the firing line, or is that quiet support that you were giving Rach, just being there and not saying too much?
Look, I don't know if you've noticed or not yet, Shelley, but I don't do a lot of talking. I don't like confrontation. I just put my head down and try and get the job done, and then obviously try and support Rach when I needed to support her. That was basically my bigger goal. So I just tried to do the best I could in all avenues.
What a man. Gee, it's tough, isn't it? I mean, again, we talk about kids, but couples that have had children together, you've obviously been through a lot. But how does the block compare to parenting?
This was, honest to God, the hardest thing that we've ever done in our lives. You're leaving your comfort, you're leaving your kids at home, and you know you're doing it for a bigger picture. You know you're doing it all for them at the end of the day, but it's still a long time to be away from your babies and to be dealing with them not coping so well. And then the feedback that we were getting, I personally think they were very hard on us. I just felt like I wasn't doing a good job anywhere. So on a scale of being harder than parenting, I think the block was harder.
You must have really good kids.
But then, you know, you go home for a day and you think, no, the block's easy, I'll go back. Right now it's harder.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that fairness, because I know you did have some concerns about that, Rach, which you expressed obviously in the episode we saw last night with Ronnie helping out, of course, about the judges' feedback, watching it back and now seeing the sort of the behind the scenes and what was happening in all of the other houses at the same time. Do you still feel like you were pretty hard done by?
I feel like, especially when I watch it on a Sunday night, some of the feedback we get, being timid, being safe, then they go into another room where maybe there's less happening and that room gets a 10. It confuses me. Sometimes I think, God, what more could we have done? Like,
So it hasn't become clearer watching it at home. You're not feeling any less robbed.
I don't necessarily feel robbed. It's just inconsistencies. And like, I'm going back over what we've seen already so far. You know, comments in our room about dried flower arrangements, and then another room having dried flowers and that gets a 10. It's just those little things that you go like, oh my God, okay, no worries, that's fine. The whole Ronnie thing really threw me. I have to be clear, and I said it to Shaz and because that had nothing to do with them. Firstly, what Ronnie said to me from his own mouth was he was there to paint for them. He was going to paint the kitchen for them, and then he was going back to paint their other rooms.
Oh, the Ron dog loves to stir the pot, doesn't he?
And I was like, you're what?
I'd still like to know if
He
Ronnie
got
was
you
even
up.
invited. I expected him to show up at some time, but
Yeah.
I was just like, what are you doing? And it just the fact that their feedback, even though our finishes had been much better week in, week out, their scoring was much higher than ours.
and that hurts.
It hurts because the Block's a renovations show and it's a renovations competition. And the renovation includes the build. It includes that too.
Even more so for me, because you can strip everything else out. But if your foundations and the fundamentals of the build aren't there, then, there's not much you can do.
Exactly. We come from a renovations background. We're very, very big on the build and the foundation and the bones of the house. And for us to be going through rooms where the quality of the build wasn't there and these people are getting seconds, first, winning rooms, and then to have someone brought in, to help. As long as I can walk in on a Sunday night and think that this is fair, I'm all good.
Mm-hmm.
But the minute I start to think, oh no, hang on a minute, that's what started to throw me.
And the fact that your mental health is just as important as your neighbours is. And perhaps we didn't really know how tough you were doing it until this week.
What you haven't seen from the beginning until right now is I'm really walking a fine line on trying to hold it all together. And I'm having my moments of breaking and I'm having phone calls with my kids that are upsetting and I'm crying to Ryan because I don't feel like I'm getting it right. And that's been happening for the past 6 weeks. And then, we do Tim and Tyler's and that really was just the cherry on top in terms of my emotional levels. Like that just really got straight to my heart. And then to be doing it in Kitchen Week where I'm thinking, oh God, how am I balancing this? But I want to spend my time in Tim and Tyler's, but we still have to deliver a kitchen. And what you're seeing is a whole culmination of a lot. And then it finally all comes out. And the minute that I have that break, I felt so much better.
Well, thank you for sharing that with us on and off camera, and thank you for being you. The more that we can see that vulnerability in people who also have that inner strength like yourself, it does do so much for everyone at home. And I really do appreciate you being that vulnerable for us during the process too.
Thanks, Shell. And I have to say as well, this is very nerve-wracking for me because I am not an overly vulnerable person. I'm the person that goes home and cries in the shower. I don't even cry in front of Ryan. So for me to feel like Australia is going to see me at probably one of the biggest breaking points I've had in my life is very, very, very nerve-wracking. And all I can say for anyone listening is just be kind to us. Be kind to us.
Yeah, look, that's a life lesson for people, isn't it? But yeah, you're doing it and you are being as real can be. So don't worry about the haters. Haters going to hate, and I'm sure there are 50,000 times as many people that are loving you than the pricks on socials. So don't worry about it.
Yes, Shelley.
Well, hopefully there's some good weeks coming up for you. You have hit that breaking point. You said we are doing that beautiful charity house. God, that always makes us feel so good, using the block for good and making changes in other people's lives as well. So plenty more good stuff to come. You know what we have been doing here at the podcast is playing a couple of little games with our contestants. And boy, do we have a good one for you.
Oh, I'm excited.
Are you ready for this?
Go for it.
Of course.
All right. Well, we know that Kitchen Week can be very, very stressful, and kitchens are also places that we can savour the good things in life. So, Rachel and Ryan, it's time for a bit of kitchen R&R.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Okay, you've got 30 seconds to name 5 things you can find in a kitchen that start with the letter R. And your time starts now.
Go quick.
An
A rolling pin.
One.
Rolled oats.
Uh,
Raspberry jam.
rocket.
Rocket. One more.
Rinsing.
Rinsing
salad.
area.
Good work. Rachel and Ryan, R&R, well done, well played. It is so wonderful to have you here on the podcast. I hope we get to chat again. I'll come up with another fun little game for us to play. But stay with your kids and enjoy the ride.
Thanks, Shelley.
very
We
much,
love
Shelley.
talking to you.
Thanks again.
Hopefully talk to you soon.
Don't miss the Block on 9 this week, and never miss an episode by following the official Block podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. The Block podcast is thanks to Simonds Homes, the great Australian builder. I'll catch you next week. The official Block podcast is sponsored by Simonds, the great Australian builder. Every day at Simonds, our people stand by our promise to be with you throughout your new home journey. Over the last 70 years, Simonds have seen and dealt with it all. And despite today's trade and material shortages, our size and strong relationships means we'll deliver on what we promise. So if you're ready to join the thousands of Australians we're welcoming home each month, talk to Simonds, the great Australian builder. Find out more at simonds.com.au. CDB-U 49491.